Hello, Miss Bell's Algebra 2 class on this, the 18th of March, looking at the quiz factor review. There is going to be a quiz tomorrow. I want to go through the evens this time because you did a lot of the odd ones in class, and if you missed some of the odd ones, here are some of the answers. I'm going to explain the even ones though. I'm going to start with, might as well explain this one to get the explaining going. At the top of the page, 1 through 6, you're just using the FOIL method to put these, find the product, multiply these two quantities together. So remember the FOIL method, we're going to multiply the firsts in each quantity, so 5x times the x becomes 5x squared. Then you're going to multiply the outside, so 5x times the 2 is the outside. So 5x times 2 gives me 10x. The inside, the negative 6 times the x is negative 6x. And then the last, so the last in each, negative 6, and the positive 2 becomes negative 12. Now I'm just going to combine like terms. The only like terms that I have here are 10 minus 6, the x's. Okay, I don't have any other x2s. I don't have any other just numbers without variables. I just have these numbers right here with x's. So I can only combine these. So 10x minus 6x gives me a positive 4x. Everything else just comes down. So I'm left with 5x squared plus 4x minus 12. Let's go on to number 2. I'm going to use the FOIL method. First times the first. 5p times 5p is 25p squared. The outsides, I'm going to multiply the outsides. 5p times negative 2 gives me negative 10p. Then I'm going to multiply the insides. Negative 4 times 5p gives me negative 20p. And then I'm going to multiply the last. Negative 4 times negative 2 gives me a positive 8. The only terms I can combine are in the center here. They're the ones with p. Negative 10p minus 20p gives me negative 30p. I bring everything else down. 25p squared minus 30p plus 8 becomes my answer. Number 4, I'm going to multiply v times 7v. Gives me 7v squared. The outsides, v times 8 gives me a plus 8v. A negative 3 times a 7v gives me negative 21v. And then the last times the last, a negative 3 times a positive 8 gives me negative 24. I combine my like terms, and these are the only like terms in the center here. So I have 8v minus 21v. That gives me a negative 13v. For number 6, first times the first. 5x times x is 5x squared. The outsides I'm going to multiply. So I have a negative 6y times x. And you could put the y first, but I like to keep it alphabetical, so I put the x first. It doesn't matter. So I have negative 6xy. And then the inside times the inside, I have negative 8y times a 5x. Gives me negative 40xy. Once again, I could have the y first and then the x, but I like to keep it in alphabetical order. It does not matter because you're multiplying these values together. And then I'm going to take the last times the last. A negative 8y times a negative 6y gives you a positive 48y squared. I can combine these like terms, and they're in the center. Notice the pattern. They've always been in the center. So I combine these like terms. Negative 6 minus 40 gives me a negative 46xy. I bring everything else down, and there you have the final answer. Okay, now for the rest of this worksheet, you are doing the opposite. So you are trying to, factor these out. So you're factoring each completely. So in this first one, there's just going to be, by looking at it, I'm not having, perfect squares or anything like that, or, I have numbers that I can take out. I can find the factors for 45 and 81. And I told a student that one thing you could do is you can go online and you could just Google a factoring calculator if you're bad with figuring out factors, because that's, I think, the holding up point for a lot of students. And so you would type in 45 and 81, and it would just tell you, well, 9 is it. And then as far as the variables go, the biggest that I could take out of all of these is the B3. Okay, I can't take b to the 5th power out of here because I only have 3 b to the 3rd power. So I take b to the 3rd power out of all of these. Okay, and I'm left with b to the 2nd here. I'm left with only 1 b here. I'm left with no b's here. And I figured out that 9 is the greatest common factor for 45 and 81. So 9 times what equals negative 45? Well, negative 5. 9 times what equals negative 81? Well, a negative 9. Once again, 9 times what equals 45? A positive 5. Okay, so that's what I'm left with there, and that's it. I'm done. I've factored out a 9b3. This one, I could do the opposite of the FOIL method. So remember, when I figure this out, I'm looking for, something that I, can multiply the first and the first by to get R2. Well, that would just be R times R, right? And just thinking of FOIL backwards. Well, what can I multiply together and get 54, and then, put together, adding, subtracting, and get negative 3? Well, it would be 9 and 6. 9 and 6, they're 3 apart from each other, and when you multiply them together, you get 54. So I went with 9 and 6. So that when I multiply the outsides, I get 6R, and the insides, negative 9R. Negative 9R plus 6R gives me the negative 3R, just thinking of FOIL backwards. And then the last, if I take negative 9 times positive 6, I get a negative 54. Taking a look at 12, this is just going to be a perfect square situation where 25x squared can be split up into 5x times 5x. And then negative 1 can be split up into a positive 1 and negative 1. Notice when I do FOIL backwards, if I did the outsides, 5x times negative 1, I get negative 5x, and I do the insides, I get positive 5x. So positive 5x and a negative 5x cancel each other out. That's why there's nothing in the middle here. That's why there's nothing in the, like this has something in the middle, because you end up with negative 3r. These cancel out, so that's why it looks like this. Okay, this one, you got to think of two numbers that you multiply together to get 30. But when you add them, you get 13. And I went with 10 and 3. And the x, you're just going to split up into 2 x's. So thinking of FOIL method, first times the first, that gave me the x squared. The outsides, 3x, the insides, 10x. Add those together, you get 13x. And then the lasts, 10 times 3 is 30. For 16, I am going to factor out of this a 10b, because 10 goes into both 30 and 50. So I factored out a 10b, and because each of these has at least one b, so that's the greatest common factor. So 10b times what would give me negative 30b squared? Well, that would be a negative 3b. And 10b times what would give me 50b? Just multiply that by 5. So I'm done. Or you could factor out the negative also. And I remember at the beginning of this unit, she was saying something about, well, factor out the negative. So it could look like this. I could factor out a negative 10. So that negative 10 times 3b, negative 10b times the 3b would give me the negative 30b. And negative 10b times the negative 5 would give me a positive 50b. So either one of these. Kind of thinking she wants this one because she said something about factoring out the negatives at the beginning of this unit. This one, I think of two numbers I multiply to get 20, and if I add them, I get 9. Well, that's easy. That's 5 and 4. Split up the v. First times the first gives me the v2. Outside gives me 4v. Inside gives me 5v. 4v plus 5v gives me 9v. The last 5 times 4 gives me 20. Okay, I really hope this helps. Go ahead and try the odd ones. Remember to use a GCF calculator online if you're having a hard time figuring out what the greatest common factor is for some of these, and that would be very helpful, I am sure. Good luck.